everyone, and welcome to Afternoon Equality. My name is Christy, and today I'm talking to Andrea Yang, who is a lawyer turned career coach. We're going to talk about pivoting and her origin story, and kind of the way we think of conventional success versus like just now, especially after 2020 and everything that happened. So it's going to be a really great conversation. I can't wait for you to join me. So let's go. Yeah, so you're in the valley.
I'm in the valley where it's 30 degrees this morning with
Oh
ice
my
on my
goodness.
windshield.
With ice on your windshield too.
Yeah, it was actually like the first time I had ice on my windshield since moving out here. And I had to move it to a different street because we have like parking restrictions here during the day. And
Oh,
I was like, I guess I could sit here while the defroster like defrosts the windshield.
yeah.
But then it was taking forever. So I was like, well, I'll just roll down like the side windows. And so I was like trying to drive with like the side windows open. And I was like, this actually seems really dangerous.
Dangerous, yeah. Like, this may not be like the best the best thing for me right now.
Perhaps not amongst my best life choices.
I haven't had frost on my windshield since I was in Nevada, really.
Yeah.
We did have I wasn't here like yesterday, but my roommate said we had hail.
Yes, there was hail yesterday too. So
Oh,
weather
wow.
is just bonkers lately.
But then it was just like it was hella windy and and rainy and stuff, and that was pretty much it after that.
Yeah, pretty
But
much.
so where are you from originally?
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah, I grew up in
Wow.
Florida. So
Okay.
yeah.
So very I mean, kind of the same, but also not. Like,
I mean, kind of the same in that there's sun all the time, but that's pretty much where like the similarities are.
okay, okay. Alright. Well,
Yeah.
interesting. So then what brought you out to LA? Because like, did your parents move out here too, or was it just you?
No, they've been there. They've been in Florida since I don't know. I was 5.
Okay. Okay.
But no, I moved out to LA because I got a new job with Pepperdine, and Pepperdine, is in Malibu. So
Yes,
um,
we got to move right on the beach, like
I know, tough life, so tough. But yeah, no, I actually haven't seen Malibu in a couple of months now because we've been working remotely.
Yeah, no, for sure. I
So
mean, I have a good friend that lives in Malibu, so she lives like right off a cliff and or right on a cliff, not off a cliff, on a cliff.
no, that's actually awesome. She lives right off the cliff.
Yeah, like but they got snow.
Yeah, I know. I saw the reports
Like
yesterday.
they got snow a couple days ago. I was like, "Wait, what?"
I know. I saw pictures of like my mom actually was the one who sent me pictures of Malibu. She was like, "Hey, looks like it's pretty cold over there." My mom actually tells me what's happening like in my neighborhood because she's like always on the news and like just figuring out like what's happening. And so
Yeah.
I'm like kind of the opposite of that. I kind of live under a rock as much as I can.
Yeah.
So I'll wake up to these text messages being like, "Hey, like watch out, like heavy rain or like big like windstorms coming your way." And then true enough, like literally later that day it starts hailing or like
Like, "Hey,
later
mom, are you a meteorologist? Like, should we
yeah,
get you a
pretty
job?"
much. Pretty much. Yeah, so she's so helpful. I always look forward to her updates.
Oh, that's really cute. But so, okay, like speaking of mothers and parents and all that, I was really excited to talk to you because we have this sort of like similar but different origin story where like both of our parents are from Taiwan. They both came here to pursue like, what we know of as the American dream. And with that, I feel like there's this sort of there's a level of insecurity that comes with raising your kids in a place that isn't home, that isn't like, your like homeland, your place. But at the same time, it's like there's also this expectation for the for children of like those immigrants, for like the first generation afterwards, to take all the opportunities that they essentially like that they afford to us. Like, they work so hard and they do these things, they do this impossible thing, they move to a different country to give us these opportunities that we have to take advantage of. And so I kind of diverted from that path early on, but you kind of stuck with it for a little bit. So just give me a little bit of like background into like what that journey was for you, and how you got to be here. Because again, you went from Florida, you went coast to coast, like
Right. No, that's such a great question. So thoughtful. And really it's tremendous when we think about the sacrifice that our parents made. And I think it's such a sacrifice that is made with I don't know, I mean, I would imagine some blind optimism of just kind of thinking like, oh well, surely this will be better. Well, without realizing, because how could you possibly realize before you actually go through the experience of immigration? Um, all the challenges that are also going to come your way. So that's such a good point about, especially raising kids then in this new country. How do you go about navigating that when it is actually not the country you grew up in? You have no idea what the systems are, and I have to give my parents a ton of credit. Like my mom, again, she's just she's such a good researcher. And I remember growing up, I mean, she was always looking up like different, opportunities, different scholarships, like different programs, different camps, like different classes that me and my siblings could take. And I really think, for both of my parents, they really just wanted us to experience all of these different opportunities that they simply didn't have growing up in Taiwan. Like my
Mhm.
dad, he was a farmer. Like he grew up in a family of farmers, like literally planting crops,
Yeah.
and my mom, like, she didn't grow up in a particularly wealthy household in Taiwan. And she was a school teacher, when she
Mhm.
was there. But they both had like their lives and their professions, and to uproot all of that to start all over again is something that is so humbling for me to think about because like my parents, they came to the U.S. My mom was like in her late 20s. My dad was in his early 30s.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine, me being the same age and doing that and uprooting and going somewhere else, all with the idea of really wanting to benefit that next generation.
Yeah.
Um, so that's sort of one part. And the other part, I think, for me growing up, I think because it was very much so like, okay, like, well, we're here, like, we're going to make the most of this when you are presented with all those opportunities. Like mom is literally telling you there's a camp that you can go to. Mom is literally telling you there's a scholarship that you can apply to. Um, I always felt like, oh well, how can I not? I mean, and I think for the longest time, I just kind of I just went with everything she recommended, and it
Mhm.
was always, she always came with the best of intentions, and I would not be where I am today, but for my parents.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that also ended up leading to taking prescribed paths to quote success um, because it felt safe. Like I think it was sort of this idea that, well, if you go down certain professions, that will be a guaranteed route to security and opportunity and success and material wealth. And that's frankly how I ended up in law school, right? Like
Mhm.
when I was in college, initially I went to college. I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll be a doctor because, kind of going into college, it was like, okay, well, you're either going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, or you're going to be an engineer. That's it.
Right.
There are no other options like in the
Yeah,
world.
like, those are like you said, those are, like, the prescribed areas of success that, those are, like that's where you should go, those are the goals.
Right, right. And so that was fairly ingrained in me by the time that I got to college. But then like I started like, taking all the standard required coursework. It was sort of like the basic freshman like curriculum. And I was like, I mean, I can do the math classes, I can do the science classes, but it didn't come intuitively and it wasn't
Mhm.
fun. I mean, the most fun was me like getting together with like some of like our entryway mates to like do problem sets together, but mostly it was so we could hang out. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't actually about like the actual like work itself. um and so I remember my sophomore year I was like, I think I want to be well, I was briefly a psychology major because I was like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be like a full-on doctor, then like maybe I can be like, a therapist. um
You're still talking to people, right? Like
right, exactly. And then I got a B in psychology, and I was like, "What? What's a B? Like, this is ridiculous." And so I was like, "Well, forget it. I'm clearly not going to be a psych major anymore." I mean, literally was like that superficial a decision. And then I started thinking about how I've always enjoyed stories. I think storytelling is incredibly powerful. I think it's such a great way for us to just, I don't know, connect with other people and understand where they're coming from. And um, yeah, so I ended up being an English major when I was in college. I
Okay.
remember initially telling my mom, I was like, "I think I'm gonna be an English major," and she's like, "What? What's that? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, what does that mean?
What are you gonna do with that?" And
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I think she was confused by that for a little bit. But I was like, "Oh, but don't worry, mom. Like, it's a really good path to like going to law school." And I think that really like was just, she was like reassured by that. She was like, "Oh, good. Okay, well, so you're not going to med school, but like at least you're going to law school."
It's funny, I told my parents wanted me to go to business school, and that's kinda where I started. I did, like, pre-business for, like, a little bit, but then I was like, "No, like, I'm too, like." My dad was an artist too, like, I'm too artistic, like, I can't, like, I know now, like, after, a pandemic with, like, TikTok and stuff, like, I've realized, like, "Oh, I think I might have ADHD and, like, I'm neurodivergent," like, and there's a reason why I can't focus on, like, written things a lot and why, like, I need to have, like, like, I have to be very, like, I have to be using my hands somehow, like, so sitting and studying and, like, and being, like, a very conventional, like, student or, like, a corporate office worker or whatever, like, doesn't work for me. Like, I cannot for the life of me sit still and do it. And so, like, but I didn't know that then. Like, all I knew was, like, I just wanna draw and I wanna, like, make pretty things, and I don't wanna sit here and learn about the economy and, and information systems and those sorts of things. And so that's kinda how I ended up in art school. And then but it was always, like, I always went to art school with the intention to go back to business school once I got the design part out of me. And, like, that's what I told my parents, like, I'll go to business school afterwards, but I wanna have this first because then at least this will give me, like this will, fulfill this artistic side of me,
Yeah.
and then also give me an avenue into, like, a new kind of, like, business.
Oh, I like how you spun that.
But so, okay, you said something a little bit earlier about and it was really interesting because I've been talking about this with my roommate and with my friends a lot. This idea that, like, our parents came here to benefit the future generation, but I feel like our generation, like how we are now, is like, yes, we're thinking of the future, but also we're kind of on this path where we're also thinking about ourselves and, like, and how we feel in the moment with what we're doing. And so, like, we're not just working to work to benefit children, like we're also working so that we're happy in order to benefit our children, like, later whenever that happens, like, because I know, like, not, we're all obviously not on the same schedule as our parents were. But so you left law, right? So
Yeah.
can you describe, like, what brought you to that decision, like what your parents thought, like, and just kind of what that whole thing was like for you?
Yeah, great question. So basically, I practiced law for about 7 years and worked at two different firms, worked for two different judges. And I was actually thinking about it the other day. I have been in my job at Pepperdine the longest of all of the jobs I've had since law school. That's interesting. But I always felt like, when I was in practice, um, it never felt like the shoe that fit precisely. It was never like the perfect match.
Mhm.
And I think for a while I was just like, oh, maybe I just need to find another legal job, right? Like,
Yeah.
I just change the environment. Maybe if I'm not in a billable environment, like that'll be different. And it was different. But maybe if I just like tweak all these little factors here and there in the job description or the job setting, maybe I'll find, a better fit. But it basically came to a point where, I was in that seventh year of practice and really like thinking, okay, like what does come next after this? Because there is, when you're in law, like at least in, in private practice, there is sort of another prescribed path to success. Like people try to make partner. And I was looking around at, the partners I worked with, and I think they're great people, like they're good humans. But I just didn't want their life. Like I wanted at 5 o'clock to leave so that I
Yeah.
could ride my bike. Like I wanted just like the really simple pleasures of life that would come with a more flexible schedule. And I realized I was like, okay, this law firm setting is not going to work for me because
Mhm.
when the expectation for attorneys, I mean, you are measured in large part on your billables for the year,
Right.
and that means you're likely. I mean, you can leave at 5, but you're likely taking your work home and logging back on after dinner
Right. So you're
or
never not working.
never not working. And I also just never really actually had the passion to practice, as a commercial litigator because money has never been my primary motivator. Like my primary motivator has always been just connecting with people and understanding their stories, what they care about, what matters to them, what are their values.
Right.
That it was just really hard for me to get into my cases the way that I saw, some of my coworkers. Just they just dove headfirst into everything, and I was like, "It looks like you're really loving it. Like, do you want some more work?"
Yeah.
And then people were like, "You're going to be short on hours if you just keep giving away your work." And I was like, "This is true."
Yeah. Like, yes, but
Yes, but right. And but yeah, so basically, like in that last year of practice, I had been wanting to get out for a while. And in that last year, when recruiters would reach out, I would, connect with them. And I think at that time, I just actually didn't realize that I actually just had no idea what I wanted. I actually had completely lost sight of who I was at that time. Like for 20 plus years, like I had really made all of my decisions based on what looked good on paper, what,
Mhm.
had a lot of prestige. And it was really kind of like ambition for ambition's sake rather
Yeah.
than ambition as a tool to further like a greater purpose or mission.
Mhm.
Um, and so, you know, I remember at sort of like at the end of my tenure at the firm, it kind of got to this point where I had gotten myself into a situation where I had met somebody, and it didn't turn out to be like an actual relationship, but I was like really into this person for a while, and when that ended, I was so distraught, like seriously distraught, like I was crying every single day for like a good month, and
It hurt.
it really hurt, yeah. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was actually just me, like all of the attachment that I had to like my idea of who this person was, rather than like the actual person,
Yeah.
um, or like what this possibility could represent. And so, like, my mind was literally like 30 chapters down the road, rather than like being in the moment of like you literally just met this person,
Yeah. Like, this was never actually gonna go anywhere.
right? Right. So yeah, when that happened, I was very very upset. I could not get any work done, and again, crying every single day for like a good month. And I was like, "Whoa, this is weird," because in proportion to like how well I actually knew this person for how long, like I was like, "This is bizarre." But I actually think it was life's way in a greater in the grander scheme of things, to really just like get my attention, to be like,
Mhm.
Andrea, look at your life. Like, are you actually like happy with who you are and where you're at and like where you want to be going? And so I think, in part because I couldn't get any work done, I was actually getting kind of embarrassed because I'm like, I am not adding value to my teams and the firm, and I really value the relationships that I have with people. And so I was like, I
Mhm.
think I need to leave.
Like, I need to do something else
I need
and
to
yeah.
leave this place in order to like preserve my dignity while it's still intact.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, one of my coworkers at the time, Brian, bless his heart, he was like, have you thought about like moving home with your parents? That way you could quit, because I told him, he was like, why don't you just quit? And I was like, well, if I quit, then I can't afford to live in Seattle. Like it's expensive here. And he was like, well, why don't you just move home with your parents? And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like,
Yeah.
but then he planted that seed, and afterwards, I was like, wait a minute. I wonder if that would work. So I messaged my parents, and I think it was my dad who responded, because I imagine perhaps my mom was just really confused by the whole thing. Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But I messaged them. I basically said, curious if I could just, move home for a little bit. And the response was, did you quit your job?
Like, what happened? What did you do?
Right. And I was like, I haven't quit my job yet, but I'm thinking about it. I'm just exploring safety nets.
Yeah.
And they were so kind. Like the message that came back, I actually don't know exactly who it came from, but they were like, of course, like we would love for you to come home.
Oh.
And so I ended up moving home for about 7 months, and
Okay.
yeah, and so I moved back home into my childhood bedroom in Florida. And it was such a needed, necessary period for me just to, I mean, I called it a sabbatical to make it sound like it was something, but it really wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a break, and it was like, cause like, I've done that too, right? Just, you sometimes need to just, like, go back and kind of escape for a little bit and really, like, kind of reestablish what your roots are.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, moving home, I know, like, conventionally sounds scary to a lot of people because, like, I think it implies that you failed.
Yeah, right. Well, that's really how I felt.
Yeah.
So, conventionally and also in my own experience, I was like, I am a failure. I have moved
Yeah.
with my parents. I'm in my childhood bedroom. I don't know what to do next. I don't know what happens next. I don't have another job lined up, but I'm an adult.
But you did figure it out, and I mean, now, because obviously you're not in Florida anymore, so you figured it out and you moved out to LA or
Yeah, I
to.
don't live with my parents anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think, like, I love what you said about, sort of subscribing to, like, the conventional forms of success and not really finding it's successful for you. I mean, like, it was successful, but it wasn't because it wasn't fulfilling. And
Right.
so I feel like there's this sort of, like, there's this thinking that conventional success is what is the goal. But I think, like, what you realize and what a lot of people are realizing, especially, like, after the pandemic, or I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but after 2020, and, like, just, kind of having to be in this place where we're stuck at home, we're working from home, we're, obviously living at home, everything is kind of in one place. And so we're having to reevaluate just what it is that, like, work life balance has, like, a whole other meaning, because it's no longer like, okay, like, how do I balance getting from one place to another? It's like, okay, how do I balance being, like, stressed out from work and then trying to relax at home, because home is usually where you go to relax, right? But
Yeah,
now
but
it's become this place that, like, it has to include everything. And so it's not so much, you no longer have the luxury of being physically able to separate those mentalities. Like, you really have to do it yourself. And so, the word pivot came up a lot last year, especially, and I personally think it ended up being overhyped. But, like, the ideals of it are still there. Like, most people had to do this, like, reevaluation that I feel like was needed, and a lot of people didn't realize that they did need. But so then you did the ultimate pivot as well. Like, you completely changed careers and paths and all that. So what, like, describe that.
yeah, well, I think it's so interesting too, and I feel so fortunate that my life literally just like crumbled like that in 2017 because I actually feel like because I had that experience of, everything crumbling to the ashes and having to rebuild from that. I'm so grateful that that happened earlier on a couple years ago so that when this pandemic hit, um I actually felt like I had so many tools to work with, the new changes because literally like my life was just in
Yeah, hang on 1 second, sorry, the neighbors.
oh, okay.
They have a dog that, like, hangs out outside, and he's kind of a jerk, but he's also, like, I think, like, they don't give him a lot of attention, so it's like,
Oh,
yeah,
I feel bad. Maybe we can invite him on.
I know.
We'll give you some love here.
I know. I think we're clear. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but I think because my life literally like shattered a couple years ago, I was like, oh, okay, this is fine. It's a pandemic. I mean, it sucks, obviously, not being able to, go to as many places as I used to. But you're right. I think there is, and I hear this in lots of conversations with people too. This idea that because we've been at home for so long, and literally because we don't have that human to human interaction
Mhm.
on the regular, um, our jobs are literally stripped to exactly what the tasks are.
Yeah.
And, a couple of the attorney clients that I'm working with in my coaching practice, they've expressed this idea that, before they got some of their, satisfaction from the job from interacting with their coworkers. And it's so relatable. I mean, that's what I enjoyed the most when I was in practice. I mean, I just had great people to work with. And now that they don't have that, or people are just boxes on Zoom, it really is like, okay, well, do you like writing a brief? Do you like doing legal research? Do you like handling discovery? Like, these are like the bare bones of like what it is to be a litigator.
Yeah.
Um, and if you don't like that work, it's like, wait, I don't even have like the social interaction to like kind of soften that or
Right.
get like a little bit better. And so I think it is accelerating the process for a lot of people to think, okay, like if it isn't this, like, is there something else that would be more fulfilling where the bulk of my job is enjoyable? And of course, the answer is yes. Of course, it's out there, and it's for for everybody to find on their own path and journey. But I know that since I have, to use your word, pivoted to this professional development space. I mean, like my day is on the whole actually really enjoyable because like I really like the core nature of my work, whether it's with students, whether it's with attorneys. I mean, so much of it literally is it's conversations with people to help them get clarity on what matters to them, what's exciting to them, what's hard for them, like what does it mean to be them? Who do they want to be? Who are they now? How do they want to change? Like these are literally topics that like I could go for days just like chatting about. That the fact that it's like literally my job to do that, I'm like, oh, like you're literally paying me to like do what I love. Like that's amazing. Like how
Yeah.
cool is that? So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, no, that's perfect. Just a quick follow-up though. What does that pivot really mean to you, and how do you help guide others to do this in your work now? Because you said
Yeah,
you're a professional development coach or career coach, like whatever, however you want to
yeah,
like title yourself in that space.
right, right. When I think of the word pivot, I mean it really is both an internal pivot as well as an external pivot. I mean, like the external pivots are what we see of other people, right? They
Hmm.
maybe make a job change, they might have a switch in like relationships, all the externals. But the core, the fundamental core of like what I do with my coaching space, it really is actually that internal pivot to really understand, okay, what is the inner landscape of yours? What filters are you looking at life through?
Hmm.
And basically, like I work with the way that I work with people, I always start out with this energy leadership index assessment, which is a fabulous, fabulous tool. It's kind of different. It's different from like the strength finders or like the MBTI, the personality test.
Uh-huh.
Because with like the personality test, like our personalities are relatively fixed. They usually don't change very much over the course of our life.
Right.
Your attitudes can change like drastically within
Mhm.
a short amount of time. And so this energy assessment, it really is an attitudinal assessment. It's to help people figure out, like, okay, like literally, what are the energetic lens that you are looking out, through with whatever situation you're in. And I teach them an energy system where you can figure out, like, okay, like, on like the lower resonating end of that energy, which is not bad. It just is.
Mhm.
That's going to be like where you find that space of like apathy or judgment or blame or anger. Things are black and white. And on the opposite end of that spectrum is what we call high, anabolic energy, which is that space where you find a lot of intuition, creativity, connection, like
Oh,
wisdom, a
interesting.
lot of joy. Um, and you pick like which spectrum you want to be on. Literally no judgment, but
Yeah.
there's this whole range in between. And at any given moment, whether our day is going just completely routinely, there's no major trigger happening, we're going to end up somewhere on that spectrum. And
Mhm.
also we're going to have our own stress reactions too when something unexpected happens that perhaps we didn't like in the moment. That's going to trigger another set of responses. And so basically I teach people how to become really aware of their energetic lens in any situation so that they can more consciously choose where they want to be at any given moment with whoever they're with. So
That's
that I
so
think is,
interesting.
yeah. So it's I find it to be a really powerful tool to help really start catalyzing that internal pivoting process.
Mhm.
Because I think at the end of the day, like our minds create our worlds. Like the way that I look at life, like I'm creating all of that like in here. I actually
Mhm.
can't blame it on anybody else. It's entirely my responsibility.
Right.
Likewise, everything is energy, like whether it's the food we eat, whether it's the electrical currents that like, allow like the lights above me right now to like turn on. to literally the thoughts and the feelings and the actions that we take, they all correlate at different bands of energy. And so I'm like, okay, well, knowing both that everything is energy and knowing that my mind creates my reality, like that actually gives me all the control to figure out, like, okay, like how do I want to show up in any given moment with whoever I'm with? And I think once that awareness piece is in there, and once that like conscious choice piece is in there, it's super, super helpful because, of course, when you're showing up in a state where you're feeling a little bit lighter, people pick up on that. And then
Yeah,
the way that you react to somebody who's like down in the dumps is probably different from, if you come across somebody who's like, really feeling like pretty high on life, right?
for sure, yeah.
So
No, it sounds like when people say, like, when you're vibing high or vibing low. Have you heard that?
when
Where
you're
it's
vibing
like,
high, you're vibing. What does that mean?
no, when you're vibing high, or so you meet someone who's, like, really happy, it means they're vibing high, or, like,
Huh?
or you meet someone who's kinda, like, maybe not so, like, they're a little bit, like, they have, like, a lower energy, like, they give off, like, like, low
Mhm.
vibes.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it kinda sounds like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And truly, like there's no judgment. Like we are where we're
Right.
at, and each level serves its own purpose. And so, really, the key is like, okay, like are you using whatever energy level you're at? Are you using it consciously so that you can maximize, the pros to that level? Or are
Mhm.
you acting out of default, simply because it's what you're used to?
Yeah.
And I think the pre me, like my lawyer me, it was a lot was just on default. Like a lot of it was just I was acting on habit.
Mhm.
And my life in the last couple of years, it really has been this process of like consciously rewiring myself so that I'm like, okay, got like I'm very aware of like what my habits are, and knowing that I'm like, okay, well, do I want to keep doing that? Where is it serving me? If it's not serving me, like how do I want to change it a little bit?
Mhm.
So I guess like that's what I think about when I think of the word pivot. Like there are these internal pivots that have to
Yeah.
happen. And of course, as the internal shifts, your external shifts as well. Um, so it's really fascinating because sometimes like people will find literally their external circumstance has not changed at all, but internally they have completely shifted.
Yeah.
So their experience of the exact same circumstance, they're like, oh, I'm totally cool with this. It's fine.
That's actually what happened to me, because I was actually unemployed before the pandemic, before lockdown started.
Uh huh.
I was supposed to start a new position the week that lockdown happened,
Okay.
and obviously that didn't happen because lockdown happened.
Right.
Um, but so then, I ended up I was stuck at home for I didn't know how long, and I that's kinda how I ended up doing this, was because this is having these conversations, like, being able to, like, exchange this information, like, being able to learn these things from other people really became how I lived. This is what made me happy, and so it was like, I need to, like, obviously, like, this is what I'm vibing with right now.
Yeah, totally. And I love that. I mean, you would not be doing this project but for the fact that you have been at home and that you have
Yeah,
extra time freed up from what
right.
otherwise would have been a job. I mean, what you said that resonates so deeply with me because, I have this YouTube channel now, which by the way, like I never thought I would have a YouTube channel. That's like
Right.
not in the life plan, so to
I
speak.
feel that, I tell you, I so feel that.
But it has happened in part because, I don't commute to work anymore, right? Like I
Yeah,
literally have an extra 90 minutes every single
right.
day, right? And I think also because I don't have that human to human interaction as much as I did before in person, I really crave that. And so the channel has been this really great way for me to reconnect with friends, to reconnect with old coworkers. I mean, it's been so fun. And what I love about it and what I love about what you're doing in your project is, like these are the questions that are like interesting and that matter. And I really actually have very little patience these days for small talk. I'm just bored by small talk. So just
Yeah.
no, let's just cut to the chase. Like, who are you? Like, I want to know everything about you and what makes you
Let's
tick
get
and
to
like
it.
what you're excited about. Yeah, so I feel like I've been able to fill like my days with so many of these conversations, and it's so energizing and incredible. It's been such a gift of this pandemic experience.
Yeah. But so I want to go back to you were talking about this like this scale that you use. Like is there a tool or something that people like can do or can use to like if they're just curious like
Yeah.
like maybe they don't like they're not wanting to pivot, maybe they are happy like but if anyone's curious like is there something they can like try out
Yeah,
to like
there totally
clear
is. Anybody can Google. It's a free image on the internet, but it's actually through the coaching program that I went through. So if
okay
you type in Bruce Schneider and IPEC, which stands for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, just type in Energy Leadership Index Self
okay
Perception Chart, and it will give you a series of concentric circles that maps out the lower resonating energies all the way out to the really high anabolic levels of energy. And you'll see in that chart corresponding thoughts, feelings, and actions that people tend to take at each level. And so you
okay
can sort of really think for yourself, like where are my thoughts like kind of resonating, or like if you're more like emotion driven and that's like that's easier to access for you, just kind of go down that chart and figure out like, okay, what emotions am I in right now, and they'll give you a general sense of where you're at. And then obviously, if you want to learn more, I'm trained to administer the actual assessment itself, and I
yeah
do debriefs with people too.
amazing. So I'll get those links from you and I can add those into like the show notes and everything so
Oh
that's
yeah,
perfect.
sure, sure,
Yeah
that's good. Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah
literally, like learning that system again changed my life, and I was like, oh,
yeah
this is great. I basically want like everybody to have this tool because it really makes the world make a little bit more sense, and it makes me feel like I make a little bit more sense to myself.
yeah well, I feel like it's so valuable to like to be able to be able to see that like and be able to sort of like again like evaluate for yourself like oh like maybe you didn't think of things like the way it's like the way it's presented like maybe there is like reflection that needs to happen that no one let you didn't realize and so I think it's really valuable to have tools like that and have people like you who not just know but have experience like the process and can really like walk someone through it.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great. So fun.
Yeah. Well, with that, I know you have work to get to, so thank you so much for coming and having, this little chat with me.
Oh
And
gosh, thank you so much for having me. I just love what you're doing in this project, and I can't wait to follow along. I've been listening to your weekly episodes, so keep
oh,
up
thank
the
you so
good work.
much. It's so exciting to hear. Okay, well, thank you. And yeah, we'll definitely we'll catch up again soon. Like I love
Yeah,
this.
I can't wait. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much to Andrea for coming by and speaking with us today. It was such an eye-opening conversation. Just wow. If you want to learn more about Andrea, you can visit her at andreayangcoaching.com or also check her out on YouTube. Just search Andrea Yang. She has a ton of videos where she also talks to other lawyers turned other careers. So it's actually there's a whole amalgam of possibility there. And I love that like she's having these conversations and just seeing like what these people have shifted to. It's very interesting. So don't forget to check that out and subscribe. And then while you're there, also go to the Afternoon Equality channel and like and subscribe. Um, with that, thank you so much, and I'll see you again next week. I can't wait to sit with you all again.